Well, welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. More kids under 20 years old in America have a favorable impression of socialism today than at any time in history. We've elected prominent socialists to our Senate, to our Congress, and our schools are teaching ideologies that promote socialism, demonize capitalism, and undermine the values and systems that have produced the most prosperous nation in the history of the world. And some argue that this is the greatest threat to freedom and individual rights that we may have seen since the Cold War. Well, today's guest is going to encourage you that capitalism is not dead. And if you want your kids to be successful in business, he has the solution. His name is John Foster, and he has a program that's churning out the next generation of entrepreneurs in middle school. He's the founder and president of Middle School MBA, an author, an angel investor, a wildly successful business failure who now teaches kids the lowdown on business and entrepreneurship, inspiring and empowering the next generation of American capitalists. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure to have you on as a guest. Why are young people, first of all, let me go back. You mentioned that you failed quite a bit in business and that you're trying to help young people understand that failure is good and you want them to actually fail sooner. Why is that?
Yeah, it's so important. It's cliche at this point to say you should embrace failure, but it's actually true. And to get there, to be able to go, yeah, this failed and not feel bad about it is tough. It took me a very, very long time, but it's going to happen. You can't be afraid of it. And you have to see it as a stepping stone to something bigger. And so you've got to just develop as quickly as possible sort of an immunity to it.
Yeah. It's almost like a mindset where you see failure as, just as you said, a stepping stone to success. You know, you're essentially learning another way that it's not going to work. I think of Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb, and he famously says, "I've failed. I haven't failed to whatever. I've succeeded in finding the ways it won't work." And I think that's the thing, is right. Eventually, if you overcome these failures, you will have success. But I'm super concerned, John, because our young people are overwhelmingly open to and oftentimes in favor of socialism. What the heck is going on?
Not only overwhelmingly, I mean, maybe that's not a big enough word. It's so lopsided. Free markets are frowned upon, and socialism is seen as something great, despite every historical evidence to the contrary. And the Jordan Peterson just had Michael Malice on his podcast, and they talked about the former Soviet Union and the way they treated people. Yeah. And it's hard to listen to. It's so brutal, and the scale is so enormous. It's difficult to even hear it, much less live through it. So the threat is real. The impact would just be incredibly, almost more than you can imagine.
Yeah,
and it's because of a few things. I think one, our culture has been pushing it for a long time. Hollywood, go down the list. It's the easy, it's the virtue signal. We love people, and that's it. And you don't have to take a longer view and think, well, how do we get from A to B? So it's like the easy way out, and we're really comfortable with having things be easy.
Yeah, it's true. I think you're right. There is this softness about our culture, and there's also this entitlement, this expectation that somebody owes me something. Somebody owes everybody something. I think of this intersectional victim status where, I can claim victim status based on everything from, where I was raised to only having one parent to the skin color, what you name it. It's this nonsense that we're all victims, and it flies in the face of the way America was founded and our founding ideals. But I think it goes to the school. Yeah, go ahead.
And in the face of the way things actually work, it's back to
Right.
embracing failure. Because okay, I
Yes.
don't care what your privilege or non-privilege
Yeah.
might be. Everybody runs into stumbling blocks, and it's like Lombardi said: it's not whether you get knocked down; it's whether you get back up again.
Yes.
And that's what we have to inculcate: is this idea of I'm getting up, I'm getting up, I'm getting up.
Yeah. We need this toughness back. And I think for so long, I think, we've kind of abdicated our authority as parents, our responsibility as parents to teach our kids that life is hard. Life is hard. And we were telling them that they're entitled to everything. They get everything they could ever imagine. But I think it's deeper than that. I think our schools are in the bullseye of this. I think our schools are teaching ideologies that lead to this victim mindset and that lead to this nonsense notion of equity. When you and I were growing up, we were taught you have opportunity. Every single person has an equal opportunity. What you do with that opportunity is up to you. We're not going to ensure that you have the same outcome. I mean, can you imagine if Michael Jordan, if everybody, what it ends up doing is taking the Michael Jordans out and making everyone average. You don't have anybody any good anymore. How are our schools, you're in the middle of the school systems, how are our schools teaching an agenda, an ideology that is leading to this victim mindset and this idea that of equity?
So it goes way back. The universities long ago were taken over by the left pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
In economics, Keynes in the 30s and 40s just dominated. And Keynes was always little more than an excuse for socialism, or that it's the economic history is fascinating because we had on one hand capitalism was really coming into the fore. We had the marginal revolution, we had Menger and Hayek, and for the first time in history, in 1871, we finally had the tools to understand subjective theory and how markets actually work. But then within a few decades, as we were heading down that path, and then Keynes popped in and said, wait, markets actually stink. But you don't have to be a communist because I have a third way, and you can be a Keynesian. And he's led us toward this whole managed economy idea, which is little better than full scale socialism. It's creeping socialism, and if we stay on this course, we'll eventually get there.
Yeah. And I think, too, we've got this victim mindset where we have this infiltration of critical race theory, which is essentially trying to drive out racism with racism. It's absolute nonsense. It sees everything in life through the lens of race, where you've got victims and oppressors, where you've got a power disparity, which is just nonsense. And it turns us apart from each other. But even worse, I think, than that is diversity, equity, inclusion. The big E in the middle is equity. It's this idea that everyone must have the same outcome. If they don't have the same outcome, there's something systemically racist with our system. And, that is such a foreign idea to anyone who was raised, through the 1970s, 80s, 90s. It's just an idea that doesn't make any sense, of course, because we know the value of hard work. We know the value of your mindset. We know the value of relationships. And your outcomes are up to you, largely. So you're in the schools, and I think let's talk a little bit about your middle school MBA program, because you promise on your website that you're going to awaken entrepreneurs. That gets my attention. Awaken entrepreneurs, not train workers. And I can tell you, a lot of our listeners are parents. In fact, most of our listeners are parents, and they want their kids to be successful in business. They want, in fact, many cases, our listeners are entrepreneurs. They own their own businesses, and they want to pass that on to the next generation. Let's talk a little bit about the MBA, or the middle school MBA program.
Yeah. So as far as awakening entrepreneurs, most kids are just natural born entrepreneurs. At that stage in middle school, the classics call that the logic stage, when kids are trying to make connections. Up until then, they've learned fact. But now they're connecting between the facts, understanding how the bigger picture works. And that's what economics is about, is how does this whole landscape lay out? And so we show them that. We have tools that bring those things to kids earlier than ever before.
Wow.
And so now we give them a map. They have a map of how businesses work and how you start businesses, which is entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
and how those integrate into the rest of the economy. And so they have a map and a compass, and they can say, oh, I would like to be over there. This looks like a great spot for me. And they take their compass and they look at the landscape and say, well, I've got to go over here and walk around that hill, and then I've got to cross that river. So instead of what typically happens is in the world of education, those people aren't business people. They've typically been in the education cocoon their entire career. And they've never met a payroll. They don't know what it's like to have, to cut budgets 20%, and they just don't have those. They don't feel those realities, and so they can't transmit it to kids very well. But when you lay that out for kids, and we do activities and experiments where they run into real life, and it inspires them. We set the bar high, we trick them, we play games with them, and they just keep rising to the occasion. I had a principal a while back say, John, you're not setting these kids up to succeed. You're setting them up to fail. And I said, I know. That's what I want. I want them in every case. There's time pressure and there's risk of failure. But the way they respond is, give it to me. They're alert. Their eyes are open. They're saying, what are you going to try and pull on me next? And that's a mind that's ready to learn. And so we show them how it works. And then like they can choose. For those that have an entrepreneurial bent, they can go, okay, I know how to play that game. I see the hurdles I have to get over. For those who want to be an employee, they go, I see how this whole business works. I know how to be a better employee, right? I know how to. We had one of our former students just a month ago negotiated a $5,000 increase on the starting salary, on the salary of her first job.
Wow.
So, and she used the techniques we taught her.
Wow.
And she analyzed their situation and her situation. She came up with her spiel. She politely and calmly delivered it. And then she closed her mouth and sat there. They rolled over in 5 minutes. And in 5 minutes, she picked up 5,000 grand.
Not bad.
This is how it really works. And kids are fascinated. When I was teaching in the classroom, and they would ask me a hard question about, I don't know, say bribery or fraud out in business and in the real world. And if you would kind of hedge and want to sugarcoat the answer, you'd immediately see them pulling away. They've got these really strong BS detectors. But when you just tell them the ugly, unvarnished truth, they can't get enough.
Yeah, I love this because, we're not even teaching basic finance. I know that your program is not about personal finance, but we don't even teach basic personal finance in school, which is a stunner. But really, I have a fundamental belief that that's the parent's responsibility anyway. I don't believe that's anything that the school needs to teach. Your kids should be taught that as they get their jobs and have paper routes, or probably not paper routes anymore. I remember in my early days in school, the thing that turned me on to business and being successful in business was a program called the Lemonade Stand. And, the Lemonade Stand at the time, you basically set the price, you set your location, where were you going to set up your shop, what was the quality of the product you were going to produce, how many customers did you think you were going to get, and you ran this. It was a game, and business largely is a game, right? You're providing something of value to someone else who wants that value in a voluntary exchange. That's the beauty of capitalism. But what I love about what you're doing, and help me understand too, is this a curriculum that you can offer in public schools, private schools, for homeschoolers? Is it online? Is it in the classroom? How does that work?
Yeah, it's super cool. This is the future of education. So with the promise of online education is everybody can have the best teacher. But what typically happens when somebody's doing an online program, they don't know who the student is. And so they're
Mm.
forced to teach to the lowest common denominator.
Mm.
So if you have a kid with 2 brain cells, he's bored to death. So
Mm.
that's the hurdle. What we do, instead of going to the student, we go to the teacher. We've made it so clear and simple. None of our teachers have business backgrounds, but we've made it so clear and simple that they immediately get it. And then we give them all the tools that they need to be able to deliver it. Now you have a teacher who knows every kid in the class, knows what they're capable of, how
Mm.
fast they can go. And so they customize it to their particular kids. So as a result, we come in
Wow.
super high instead of the lowest common denominator. We're coming in at a graduate
Mm.
level. We teach concepts that
Amazing.
you're lucky if you get in graduate school: capital structure, price structure, business cycles. So we come in super high, and then we count on the teacher to be able to bring every kid up there at their appropriate pace. So
Amazing.
it's online, but it's in public schools, private schools, brick and mortar, homeschool, doesn't matter.
Mm.
Anybody can take this. And now if you're say a
Amazing.
homeschooler and you have one kid or two kids, on some of the activities, you're not only going to be the teachers, but you might take one side of a negotiation, or you might play several other
Right.
roles because the activities sometimes
Very
require
cool.
one person. But yeah, anybody can use it.
Yep.
It's just amazing.
Amazing. Why don't the teachers unions and the National Association of Educators, why don't these unions do anything? I mean, that's a rhetorical question, of course, right? Because they don't want our kids to succeed in business. They want them to be socialists. So that's a little bit of a problem. But what I love about it, how many states are you in? How many states? How many schools? How broad is your reach at this point?
We're in schools all over the country and all over the world.
Mm.
I guess in the U.S., probably half the states, plus or minus, we
Wow,
have something going there.
that's
I
great.
mean, we have a project in Africa with James
Mm.
Tooley, and we have schools in Australia and Europe.
Amazing.
So I mean,
Yeah,
it's 100% scalable. We can be in anybody's classroom
amazing.
tomorrow. That's how
Amazing.
fast it starts up. And so yeah, and when
Yeah.
earlier I said this is the future of education.
Mm.
This project we're doing in Africa, we're dealing with schools, ultra low cost private schools. Okay, these schools don't have a floor, much less
Mm.
electricity or anything else. The parents are sending their kids there for like
Wow.
50 cents a day or something like that.
Mm. Amazing.
But we're working out a way to be able to provide, getting projectors out of China, $20 FOB, and battery operated, so you don't need power. The teacher uses
Wow.
their cell phone to plug into the projector and project the curriculum on the wall.
Amazing.
And a local business sponsors the classes, so that it's a business. We're a for-profit business.
Amazing.
A charity only lives as long as the donor does, but
Yeah.
we're for profit. So we have a model here that we're building that can be self-sustainable. And
That's great.
once we show that model, then we look around and say, okay, who's the best history teacher in the world? Let's plug them in.
Mm.
Who's the best math teacher? So
Right.
when I say the future of education, I don't just mean business education. We're going for the whole enchilada.
I love it. Well, I think this is so important. And the reason I'm asking you is because we've got parents on this call who know that their children in their elementary and middle school and high school are not being taught business and economics. They are being taught socialism. They're being taught Marxism. They
Absolutely.
are being taught victimhood. They're being taught an ideology that they're entitled to something, and they're sick of it, quite frankly. But this gives us a positive opportunity to go to our schools and say, we would like you to implement this curriculum. And if they don't
Absolutely.
implement it, well, we're empowering our parents to get the curriculum. We're empowering them to choose other options like private schools, charter schools, homeschooling, and implement this curriculum. So these kids come out. I'm imagining when this gets taught in a public school, that this is such a contrast to the nonsense that's being taught about business and economics. I'm imagining that the kids have got to be scratching their heads and saying, why am I not being taught about capitalism and prosperity in business? Why is this spirit and skill of entrepreneurship so important to the American way of life, American prosperity, and also maintaining capitalism. Why is that so important?
Yeah, it goes back to our very roots. We spoke earlier about economics. It was 1871 before we really had all the tools to understand economics, and why hard money is better, and why voluntary cooperation in markets is better.
Mm.
We got the theory at that point.
Yeah.
But prior to that, in 1776, when this country was being founded, Adam Smith, that was the year Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations, but obviously that wasn't distributed throughout the world. So our
Right.
founding fathers didn't have the advantage of that. But what they did have was they had, from a century earlier, they had John Locke's theories on political freedom and human freedom. And based on that, they said, okay, this is our guide. And they built a system that operates under free markets. They didn't call it free
Yep.
markets because they didn't have that language then. But they said
Mm.
people are going to be free, and we're going to put restraints on governments, on the government's ability to tell you what to do, to inflate your money, to do all these other things, just
Yeah.
because they knew it historically. But it's in our DNA. What happens if you set up a system and you say, all right, we are not going to have coercion. The government is going to exist to protect property rights and to punish criminals. What emerges is a free market system, and that's how it happened here. But before we even knew what the theory was, but it's in our DNA, even though we didn't know. We didn't plant it there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that's why we have to maintain it. That's why I think I'm so concerned about this movement towards socialism, even worse than socialism, of course, because socialism is just one step on the road to communism, which
Right.
is complete government control of all the resources, all production, zero freedom for individuals or communities or families. So socialism is just a stopping point. I think the communists realized that it was very difficult to get free men and women to buy into this nonsense of communism, this absolute control, force, and tyranny. So they created socialism to fill the gap as a stopgap. And it sounds so attractive. Oh, everybody gets what they need, all this nonsense. We know that capitalism is consistent with human flourishing, with the idea that human beings thrive on innovation, on creativity, on solving problems, on individual incentives. The harder I work, the better I can do. It kind of is, in many ways, has lifted more people out of poverty than any system known to man. Let's talk a little bit about capitalism. Freedom, not force. Why is capitalism the only free exchange of goods and services, and why is force so evil?
Yeah, I think it's important to sort of to define capitalism because it's often misdefined by its opponents. It's the definition they like to use is that it's where people who own things exploit workers who either have to work for them at subsistence wages, or starve to death. That's the picture they want to paint. And so now you have these evil exploiters against the poor masses who have no choice. And this system exists to keep the rich people maintaining their property and their ability to exploit these poor people. Nothing could be further from the truth. The truth of capitalism is it's strictly about property rights as a way to decide who makes the rules on things. So if I'm in your house, you make the rules. And
Right.
it's clean and simple. So, and if you make great rules and a lot of people want to come to your house, then you can probably charge them to come and you can acquire more wealth and a bigger house, right? As long as you keep serving your fellow man, then your property increases, and that's good because you're obviously a good property owner and a good property user. And that scales 100% down to the smallest person who has an apartment where they make the rules, to somebody who owns half a county and is developing it and whatever. So it scales beautifully. It's all about people voluntarily interacting. If you don't want to interact with me because I'm a jerk, you go find somebody else who's nicer than I am, and I'm punished for being a jerk. So it's to understand what capitalism is. It's simply a system under which the government or somebody defines who owns what,
Mm.
and then with whatever you have, you freely operate with everybody else. And it's so that's the really clear part of the financial transactions. But what
Mm.
also happens is, you know, this is a just as we talked about in the U.S. Our market system organically grew out of the freedoms that we specified. So it's an
Mm.
organic system. It's
Yeah.
how people interact with one another best. So not
Yeah.
only do you get the most material goods, but you also get the best people. People,
Mm.
it reinforces hard work and a longer time
Yes.
preference and taking care of your family and being loyal to your friends. All those things are rewarded. But
Yeah.
if you look at it, it's really great, I think, to not look at necessarily socialism, even though it's a big problem. But if you go
Mm.
all the way to communism and
Yeah.
compare that, it's basically the opposite. Under capitalism, all property is privately owned. Under
Yeah.
communism, no property is privately owned.
That's right.
And, and
That's
the
right.
contrast is shocking. Not only
Yeah.
does it make people poor, it makes them mean and callous
Yeah.
and disloyal to one another.
Yeah.
It destroys people's souls as well as
Yeah.
just their wealth.
Yeah, and I have friends all around the world who live in communist or socialist countries, and it demoralizes human beings. It demoralizes you. You have no purpose. You are told what job you can and can't do. You're told how much compensation you're going to have. You don't own anything. And that's what makes this particularly troubling because the World Economic Forum, led by Klaus Schwab, who is a communist, and a whole bunch of other elite leaders are basically pulling the strings on the Agenda 2030, which is in cahoots with the United Nations, of all places, of all organizations. The World Economic Forum has publicly said you will own nothing and be happy, which, of course, nothing could be further from the truth.
Well, they're right
But
about
they're,
the first part.
yeah, oh, yeah, yes. In fact, we've got BlackRock now and organizations like BlackRock, which are buying up roughly 45% of all home purchases in the last year have been by BlackRock. And you have to ask ask the question, what the heck is going on? These large companies, which are associated with the World Economic Forum, are trying to buy all the properties so that you and I will own nothing. And we know that property ownership, home ownership stabilizes communities. I take care of property that I own. I take care of my car in a different way. I mean, think about how you treat a rental car. You know,
Absolutely.
you're going to rev that thing up. You might even I mean, who knows? Think about how you treat a rental property versus owning it. And I always tell my kids, when you own your home, you'll care about the carpet. When you own your home, you won't treat it this way. And we've kind of built that in to say, ownership is good. Private ownership is good. That's capitalism. And, so why is the world, a lot about the World Economic Forum, obviously. We all do. We're all waking up to this. Capitalism is the antidote to the World Economic Forum. The more we own, the more we operate our own businesses, the harder it is for socialism, communism, the World Economic Forum to flourish.
Yes. Yes, because with under a system of what they've done when you have a socialistic type system, um, and a political system, the people who get to the top of that system are the worst. They're the narcissists and the
Yes.
backstabbers and the mediocre IQ people that
Mm.
probably didn't get along with anybody in high school, but they have a talent. They can get to the top of an organization and control it.
Yeah.
And what you see the left do again and again is they take over organizations and run them into the ground.
Yeah.
They they're not able to produce things, but they can consume them like crazy.
Yeah.
And so you can look at Venezuela, one of the richest countries in the world. When the socialists got their hands on it, now it's one of the
Yes.
poorest. But along the way, Chavez and his family and his friends have become
Mm.
fabulously rich because they milk everything out of it on the way down. And
Yeah.
that's the same routine that you get with the World Economic Forum and
Yes.
all the UN. These are all taxpayer. We're paying these people to
Yes.
destroy what we have. That's basically
Yes.
how it happens.
Yes. Yeah, and we have example after example. You just mentioned Venezuela. I mean, by the grace of God, they have a new leader who is returning Venezuela from communism, which has impoverished the nation with unbelievable inflation, which, by the way, we're now starting to experience in America. He's now stripping out all the socialist roots, and I think they have a real shot at becoming a prosperous nation again.
I think you're talking about Argentina, huh?
I'm sorry, Argentina. Yes,
Same thing, just on
yes,
a smaller scale, right? Argentina
yes,
hasn't gone as far to communism as
yep,
Venezuela, but
yes,
they're more Marxist in Argentina, I would say, including
yes.
the current pope, than probably anywhere else in the world. And
It's
yes,
amazing.
Javier Milei is really
Yeah,
pulling that up by the root. God bless him.
yes. Yes. And I think incentives, I think about human nature, right? We're incentivized to succeed. We like having positive incentives, right? So the harder you work, the smarter you become, the better relationships that you form, the better products that you produce that people want and like and rave about. You win. It's a win-win. I'm providing a better and better product at a better and better price to people who want that product and are exchanging a value for it. Capitalism incentivizes human flourishing for you to become everything that you're made to be. Work as hard as you want. Doesn't matter where you start because you can end up at the top. None of that matters. You're not limited by the social controls of socialism or communism. And another thing, too, is capitalism really results in this wild level of generosity, doesn't it? I mean,
Yes.
when people are thriving, doesn't it result in people being voluntarily generous?
Yes, and if you look at people who become wealthy
Yeah.
well beyond anything they'll ever spend. We
Mm.
have a lot of people who have generated enough wealth that they'll die with half of it still in their possession.
Yeah.
Examine those people. They're very generous. They're not sitting around. They don't fill their bathtub with dollar bills and lay around
Right.
in it, right? They're
Right.
taking that money and they're going out and saying, how can I serve somebody else? Can I build a
Yeah.
business? Can I fund a business that's going to do something great? Can I build a
Mhm.
library? That's what they're doing with their money. Yes, the
Yes.
generosity is, and not only that, but look at what they do with their personal time. They're
Yes.
volunteering, they're
Yes.
mentoring. They don't just sit back on their laurels. That's not how that works.
Mhm. Yes.
They've grown up as hardworking, ethical, forward-looking people, and that doesn't stop just because now they've got all the money that they need.
Right. And I think the value of small business, small local businesses, and by small I mean not these multinational conglomerates. What we've seen, I think, through the COVID disaster was, this destruction of small businesses, closing down all of these local small businesses, telling them they're non-essential, and then migrating all of our purchases to these big box conglomerates, which are largely owned by leaders of the World Economic Forum. You've got Amazon, you've got Target, you've got Walmart, you've got all these major corporations, which all stayed open while all the small businesses were really crushed. I believe that it's the small business owner who values America, values relationships, puts out great products and services. We are oftentimes, I think, in the narrative, confusing these small local businesses with these multinational corporations who do not share our same values. Why is business demonized in general today, and can we fix it?
Well, that's the big question. Can we fix it? It's there are a lot of people who a lot of reasons people want to demonize business.
Mm,
If you've been brought up to be resentful
mm,
and unsuccessful, then there's envy that
yeah.
gets involved. If you're a
Mm,
politician, the small businessman is difficult to control. You can
yes.
go to the CEO of Walmart and say, guess what? Let's make a deal, and then it flows through. But it's very difficult to go control 10,000 small businesses. So the politician hates those people. They
Wow.
they're too independent. And if you look in case after case, the Nazi program was to cartelize every industry, right? You had to be a member of the industry association, and then the president of the industry association reported to the government bureaucrat that was in charge of that industry, and that's how they, and they did the same thing. They went and crushed small businesses because they're just too independent.
Yeah. So that's why I love what you're doing, because you're changing the narrative for our kids. We realize that what you tell kids are very impressionable. What you tell them at these ages about what's possible and about the way things work and about what they should be striving to accomplish. Capitalism is about living on purpose. It's about doing something you're passionate about, something that you are excited about. How can parents now, as we kind of wrap up, what do you tell parents today? How do they engage with you to make sure that we keep capitalism alive and that we encourage these kids to be the best expression of themselves in the business world?
Well, our website is middleschoolmba.com. Everything you need is there. If you want us in your school, you can talk to your principal or your school superintendent, and they can contact us, or you can contact us. And one thing I want to say about it is, despite how strong my personal feelings are about capitalism, in our coursework, we are totally neutral about this. I don't push my view on anybody else's kid. I think that's criminal. But what we do is we lay out the exact mechanisms for how this works, like it was a physics class. And once they understand how markets work, the market mechanisms, then we contrast that with the way Marxism works and those mechanisms, and we show them the results. But strictly in a scientific almost way. We let them draw their own conclusions. We're ideologically neutral, but the facts are just overwhelming in favor of markets.
I love that, because that's what gets you in every door in American schools,
Exactly.
right? That's what allows you to be taught in the public school, private, you name it, but you're just laying out the truth. We talk a lot about truth,
Yes.
Lay out the facts.
And let me tell you, we've had so many teachers who've had 18 years in the cocoon and never heard anything except capitalism evil, socialism good. And within a couple of weeks of using Middle School MBA, and they see exactly how it works, and it's just undeniable. It's A plus B plus C done. And they turn around and they're like, I never knew this. I can't believe it. I'm so happy to know, and I'm so happy to teach this to kids. So, in so many cases, people have just never heard the truth. And, I mean, that's why censorship is such a big deal, right? Because the truth is 10 times powerful than whatever lie you come up with. So you have to keep truth away from people that you're lying to, or else you lose them.
Yeah. And that's what I love about this program, because you're going to present it in such a way, you're going to open up the eyes of teachers who, by the way, want to teach our children truth. They want to teach them something that's going to benefit them. When their eyes are open, I can just imagine these light bulbs going off in class, and then those conversations among the school faculty starting to happen, like, oh my gosh. That's what I love what you're doing. You're helping to change the culture in a public school system in particular that is really opposed to basic facts about business and economy. So thanks for that, John. I really appreciate you being on as a guest. We're going to point people to your website, and hopefully we'll get you in a whole bunch more schools in the near future. Appreciate you, my friend.
Terrific. Thank you, Jimmy. It's really been a blast.
You bet.